All right, I'm here. We're doing this. You read the title, so let's just get right into things. All right, I've started up a new world, so first thing you got to do is, of course, give yourself a command block. So we're going to go into our chat /give at myself command_block. All right, so go ahead and place that down and open it up. I'm about to go through every button and knob in this user interface, but if you already know all this, then go ahead and skip to the timestamp on your screen. So first things first, if I make any changes to this user interface at all, and then I back out, then it's going to save all those changes. But if I make a change that I don't like, then I can just go ahead and hit cancel instead, and those changes won't be saved. If your command is so long that it gets cut off and you can't read it, then you can hit this little plus on the right, and that'll expand it all the way so you can read and type into your entire command. In the top right, we of course have the command input. This is the command that you want the command block to run. There are around 65 core commands alone in Minecraft Bedrock Edition, so we're not going to be talking about all the different commands you can use in this video, but I can offer you some really useful tools in producing the commands that you want. The big gray box on the bottom right will try and tell you what went wrong if something does go wrong. It will give you a syntax error and try its best to point out what it thinks the problem is. Sometimes it'll tell you exactly where it failed, or in other cases, like a play sound command, for example, it'll tell you it worked when it actually didn't. It's best to keep previous output turned on unless there's some reason you want to view it in real time. Now on the left we have the hover note, and if I were to type hover note, then now this will hover over my command block. When we're talking about block type, we're of course talking about the type of command block that you're using. And there are 3 block types here, but we're only going to be looking at impulse and repeater for now. So an impulse is kind of like a button. It sends out a signal one time. When I power this, it can't be powered multiple times, but I can activate it as many times as I want. A repeating command is like a redstone clock, where it's constantly activating every single tick. And if I put this redstone here, you can barely see it, but that title is constantly activating every single tick. However, if I were to add a second impulse or a second repeater, then they're not going to trigger together. It still needs its own trigger. That's where our chain command blocks come in. A chain command block can continue as many times as you want, and it will go every which way, with the signal leading into the side where the arrow is pointing. And those are the 3 different command block types. All right, moving on, let's talk about conditions. Conditional and unconditional. Practically speaking, this will never apply to an impulse or a repeater command. This only applies to chain commands. So what this is really saying is that the game is checking for the condition that the block before it got powered. So let's take a look at the system that I've got over here as an example. If I activate it from here, nothing happens. But if I step in here, I should get the title, but I'll also get the fire resistance effect, and I'll get a little bit of ice in my inventory. So what I have here are 2 conditional chain command blocks that are conditional to whether or not this title shows up on my screen. If I were to make this ice unconditional, it no longer requires the condition that I get the fire resistance effect. And by activating this outside of the perimeter, I still get the ice. In other words, in a setup like this, where we have lots of conditional chain command blocks, but then we go all the way to the front and we make this so it doesn't rely on a condition at all, then this is going to always trigger, which is going to always meet the condition of my ice, and then that's going to trigger this and meet all of these conditions, having a chain reaction all the way down the line. If you decide to turn your command blocks in a different direction and make them conditional, then for whatever reason, when you activate it, it just doesn't work. So you have to make sure that when you're using conditional command blocks, they're always facing the same direction as whatever block is under their condition. Now we're going to talk about the redstone aspect of things. This is, of course, regarding to whether or not the command block requires a redstone signal in order to input the command. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the impulse to repeater, and then I'm going to make it always active. And now this no longer requires a redstone signal. All I have to do is step within the 2-block radius, and I start getting my ice and my fire resistance every single tick. Now I can also make these chain command blocks require redstone as well. And doing that means that I'm only getting the title because these don't have a redstone signal. However, if I turn it on, then that still activates both of them. The reason that happens is because the redstone signal powering the command block also powers all adjacent blocks to it. And to fix that, we just back that block up by 1. So now this is getting powered instead of the command block. And when I step into this, I can now choose which of these I'm going to get. All right, now let's talk about ticks. We've got 2 options down here. These last 2, we have execute on first tick, and we've got our delay in ticks. Now, all you really need to know is that every 20 ticks is 1 second. So if we want this to delay every 1 second, we're going to change that to 20 ticks. And now, when I activate this, it's going to activate every 1 second. If you don't want your command to activate immediately upon being powered, you don't want it to activate on the very first tick. So we're going to turn that off, and now you'll see there was a 1 second delay before it started activating every 1 second. If you're feeling overwhelmed, I totally get it. How can anyone expect you to just know all these commands and then implement them into your game? The truth is, I don't. Oh no, my sword! Oh, jeez. Look, I've built some really cool stuff in this game. I mean, check this out. I got waves of mobs spawning behind a rising gate with sound effects and music. I'm not any more interested in memorizing all these commands than you are. Ah! The truth is, I know hardly any of them. No! Why can't I sprint? Oh, I got slowness. The secret that I have is that I actually just use AI. Oh, no, no! So my advice is to make a list of the things that you want to achieve and then see how much of it is possible by asking AI what the command would look like to get there. No! Ah! Now, I would consider AI to be the most helpful tool that I use in figuring out what commands I want to use and what will and won't work, but AI will only get you so far. So let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that I use using a lot of these commands. Once you start using these commands, you're quickly going to realize that you have all these messages on the side of your screen that you don't want. And these messages are basically the game saying, hey, you've got a command block outputting a command. And if you haven't seen it by now, then the command, hey, the command to get rid of all these messages is /game_rule command block output, and you're going to change it to false. If you already know the start of your command and what that's going to be, then the chat bar itself can actually be a really useful tool. It will tell you what order it wants you to do things in, and it will also give you some options as to what you can use. When I type /give, right away I see all these options, all players, all entities, nearest entity. I'm going to go ahead and choose all players. Now I have all of these options of things I can give myself. I'm going to go with stick, but now there's nothing else popping up for me. Just above the text bar, you see this /give, player target, item name. We already have all that. The next thing on the list is the amount. So I'm going to give myself 3 sticks. I don't know what data is. I don't know what components are. It's not giving me any more options. So let's see if this works. And boom, just like that, I've got my 3 sticks. So let's talk about coordinates real quick. Coordinates are the position that you see in the top left of my screen. You can turn coordinates on by going into your game settings, going to game, and scrolling down to show coordinates. Your coordinates are in order of x, y, and z values. So if I walk 1 block to the right, then I have an x of 0, a y of -60, and a z of +1. You can tell which axis you're on by walking in a straight line. If I walk forwards, this number on the z-axis goes up. Determining whether the number is a positive or a negative value is really important for using commands and command blocks. You can figure this out by the direction that you're going. When I go to the right, the number goes up, so this is a positive value. When I go to the left, the number goes down, so it's a negative value. However, when we reach the 0 threshold and we start to breach into the negative numbers, then walking to the right is still going to be a positive value, and walking to the left is still a negative value. Even though that number is going up right now, it's a negative value because a negative plus a negative creates a positive. So let's say I want to place a stone block right here in that exact spot. I have a few options available to me on how I use those coordinates. First, I can just stand right here and write down those coordinates. By typing those exact coordinates into the command, I can then power this and get the block exactly where I want it. If I were to put the wrong coordinates into this command and power it, then it's going to go to those coordinates instead. Alternatively, you can choose to use these 3 little squiggles instead. These 3 little squiggles represent the X, Y, and Z values of your target. If I make myself the target by typing this out in the text bar, then no matter where I am at, these 3 little squiggles will account for my coordinates. It always chooses the lower half. If I were to replace these coordinates in my command block with the 3 little squiggles, then it's going to take the coordinates of the command block. When this gets powered, it'll replace the command block. What we need to do is give it an offset. So I'm going to give this a positive offset of 1y, and now the offset of the block will be 1y away from the coordinates of the command block. Now, I also quickly want to mention that Mojang is planning on adding the ability for players to select coordinates, and that will be found in the creator settings somewhere in there, but as of version 26.21, I do not have that. Now I want to introduce to you the utility in combining simple commands with command blocks into Redstone. In a nutshell, command blocks and Redstone and all that, it's really just a bunch of bags of tricks. And the more bags of tricks that you have, the more that you can make it do what you want it to do. Now, you can pull from command blocks using a comparator, but I actually find this to be quite inconsistent. Sometimes the comparators just stay on and don't turn off after the chain block was triggered once. Instead, I've opted to turning to using the set block command to set a redstone block, essentially making wireless redstone. The only problem is, now I've got the redstone block here, what do? Well, the trick I've done is I place a impulse command block that upon a redstone signal with a 1-second delay will change this redstone block into red stained glass. Now when I place it, there will be a delay, and then it changes to red stained glass. And just like that, we have a toggleable wireless redstone pulse. Now where this really starts to get interesting is if we use a fill command instead, because a fill command can actually replace specific blocks, so it will only take the place of the red stained glass. And if we just swap their places, now it replaces the redstone blocks, and just like that, we have some on and off toggles that you can set up. I use these tricks and these fundamentals and considerations in pretty much everything I do across the board. And whenever I ask somebody what's stopping them from learning about commands and command blocks, they always tell me that they're afraid of breaking something or pushing the game too far. And so we can't really talk about the fundamentals without also talking about the caveats. Command blocks can be really powerful. They can destroy stuff that you've worked hard on. They can summon so many entities that it starts to crash your game. And they can wind up killing all of the entities if you're not careful. So if you wind up running into a situation like this, where everything seems to be breaking and falling apart and your game won't stop crashing, then it's important to know what to do. So go ahead and open up your settings, and in game, we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom to command blocks enabled, and we're going to turn that off. That's going to turn off all of the command blocks in the world so that you can hopefully break whatever is breaking your game. You can also toggle this setting in the game's main menu by editing your world directly. It's down in the cheat settings and near the bottom. If all you're using are repeating commands all the time and they're constantly putting out a signal, then you might start to see some performance issues. Anytime that the game has to generate or load a lot of blocks or entities, that also can create performance issues. So constantly loading and unloading things is going to hinder your game's performance depending on what you're playing on. The amount of lag that is produced by a command block is still significantly less than what is produced by Redstone. So if you have a world with a lot of Redstone on it and it's experiencing a lot of performance issues, then it can be a really efficient way to reduce lag by replacing a lot of your Redstone with command blocks instead. So here I have 3 different commands. Each of these have caused me pain and suffering in the past at one time or another. So first of all, fill commands can do a lot of damage if you get your coordinates wrong. And once you do it wrong once, there's no getting it back. And also, loading in too much of the wrong block or item can really break your game. And especially with a repeater command constantly putting those in, as soon as I look up, yeah, my game just crashed. So you just have to be careful with how you use fill commands and when. Whatever you're playing on, it can only handle a certain amount of entities, and as you can see, my frames are starting to drop a little bit here, and we need to turn this off. No! No! Oh, come on, let me out. Pause. Pause. Please. Pause the game. All right, so let's talk about the kill command for a second. We cannot just do all entities. That's going to kill everything in your world. You have to be very careful. If I kill every single villager, that's going to kill every villager in my world. Any villager that's in render distance, at least, and we don't want that. We want to kill just these villagers. So how do we do that? If I open up my kill command, we're going to go /kill, and we're choosing entities. So many different things in this game are entities. Things like mobs, arrows, minecarts, boats, armor stands, falling blocks, end crystals, items, XP. So we're going to put in some brackets here and give it a condition of the type villager, comma. And it's also going to be within a radius of 5 blocks. And now when I hit this, it is only killing the entities in this radius, and it is also only killing villagers. Now I want to talk a little bit about ticking areas, which are chunks of your world that are always loaded in. I can add a ticking area with commands, and ticking areas will essentially load an area in all the time. So even when I fly away from this command block and it goes completely out of my render distance, I'm going to continue getting this ice because it is constantly loaded in no matter where I go. Welcome to my creative office. This is my creative office because this is home to the only ticking area in my entire world. Everything you see within this black border is constantly loaded in at all times. Now, there's a lot of stuff here, and I've had to be really careful about what I turn on and when, and how I use this area. You can imagine that if somebody were to make multiple of these, especially in areas that spawn mobs, then it can dramatically hinder your game's performance. This is excellent in moderation, because although it can be really easy to add a ticking area in, and I know it says it gives you 10, ticking areas can actually be pretty tricky to remove unless you know exactly where you put it. Now, NPCs are a really cool entity that you can get one of 2 ways. You can directly summon an NPC, or you can give yourself the 51st spawn egg in the list, and that will give you an NPC spawn egg. I can tie commands to the NPC in creative mode, And then when I interact with it in survival mode, I'll see the name and the dialogue, and I'll have these button options that produce the commands that I have inputted into the NPC. NPCs are great devices to use. They're so much fun and they come in handy for so many different things, but the problem lies in their memory usage. Using a lot of memory means it'll be much harder to download and upload copies of your world if it were to get corrupted. Anyway, everybody, that wraps it up for everything I could come up with on what I consider to be the fundamentals when it comes to Minecraft Bedrock Edition's commands and command blocks. If this was helpful in getting you started, leave me a like on this video to let me know. Don't forget to subscribe and leave me a comment down below on what you guys were working on. I'd love to hear about it. Anyway, thanks for watching.